What if everything you believe about yourself is not actually true? Not because you are lying to yourself, but because you have never actually tested who you could become if you stopped accepting the smaller version of yourself that the world convinced you to be. Most people operate from an identity they inherited, from criticism they absorbed, from past failures they did not process, from opinions they accepted without questioning, and they never realize this identity is not who they are. It is just who they decided to become based on incomplete information. Identity is not fixed. It is chosen. It is practiced. It is built every single day through decisions you make when no one is watching. Today we explore 6 principles that rebuild your identity from the ground up. Not because you need fixing, but because the person you are becoming deserves to be built intentionally, not by accident. Rule 1. Act as if you are the best. You walk into a meeting. Before you say a single word, the room has already read you. The way you carry your shoulders, the pace of your breathing, the space you allow yourself to occupy. These things speak louder than any introduction. Most people enter spaces as a question. Do I belong here? They shrink just enough that others notice. They speak with upward inflection, turning statements into questions. And the world responds exactly to what they have communicated. No, you probably do not belong here. But here is what few people understand. Confidence is not something you earn first and then express. It is something you express first, and then your mind catches up. The Stoics understood this. Your body and mind are in constant dialogue. When your posture collapses, your mind follows with self-doubt. When you stand with intention, your brain receives a signal. You are in control. This is why acting as if you are the best is not arrogance. It is alignment. It is deciding in advance that you will move through the world from the identity you are building, not the fears that used to control you. But you cannot act like the best while thinking like the weakest version of yourself. This is the critical truth. If your mind is still replaying old failures, still listening to criticism from years ago, still believing labels others placed on you, then every forward step will feel like a battle. Your mind will pull you backward toward the familiar, even if the familiar is small. Identity transformation begins in your thinking. Before you can consistently act from strength, you must interrogate the story you have been telling yourself about who you are. Many people carry narratives they do not even realize are running. I am not the type of person who can do that. I have never been good with money. I am not disciplined enough. These sentences feel like facts, but they are just old recordings playing in the background. The Stoics called this capacity prohairesis, your conscious ability to choose your own narratives. You have the power to audit the stories running in your mind and deliberately replace them. Not with delusion, with truth. If you failed at something in the past, that is information. It is not proof that you will always fail. If someone criticized you years ago, that is their perspective. It is not your destiny. If you made mistakes, those are events that happened. They are not the essence of who you are. When you stop accepting old narratives as permanent truth, you reclaim the ability to write new ones. A person who struggled with discipline last year is not automatically someone who is weak. They are someone who is learning how discipline gets built. A person who was rejected from an opportunity is not unsuitable. They simply did not meet that specific moment's requirements, which can be changed. This rewrite creates a powerful psychological shift. Instead of seeing yourself as fundamentally limited, you begin seeing yourself as someone in development. Instead of asking, "Why can I not do this?" you ask, "What am I learning about how to do this?" The question changes. The identity changes. The future changes. Rule 2. Protect your mind. Your mind is not a neutral space. It is being designed and redesigned every single day by what you allow into it. Most people treat their attention like a public space where anyone can walk in and set up camp. You wake up. Before you have had a single coherent thought of your own, you check your phone. You scroll through content designed by people you have never met, created specifically to trigger your emotions and capture your attention. By the time you sit down to build your own life, your mind is already crowded with other people's voices. This is not an accident. This is the default design of modern life. And it is devastating to identity, because identity requires clarity. Identity cannot form in a noisy environment. The Stoics understood something equally important as their philosophy. They guarded their minds like fortresses. They were intentional about which voices were allowed inside. Seneca, who lived in Rome with infinite distractions available to him, made a radical choice. He would spend extended periods in intentional silence, not because he was hiding from life, but because silence allows the mind to organize itself. Clarity grows in quiet. Confusion grows in chaos. When your mind is constantly processing external stimuli, it cannot think deeply. It can only react. A brain flooded with information operates in reactivity mode. It has no space for strategy, creativity, or the kind of thinking that builds identity. Protecting your mind means making deliberate decisions about what information gets access to your consciousness. Create a mental whitelist and blacklist. Your whitelist includes sources that strengthen your thinking, books worth learning from, content that expands your perspective, communities that elevate your standards. These sources feed your development. Your blacklist includes sources that weaken your focus, content designed to trigger comparison, voices that constantly criticize, conversations that drain your energy without providing value. These sources do not support your future. Your attention is the most valuable resource you possess. Where your attention goes, your thoughts follow. Where your thoughts go, your identity forms. And where your identity forms, your future takes shape. This week, create one intentional block of silence. 90 minutes with no phone, no podcasts, no input. Nothing but your own thinking. Your mind will begin organizing itself. Thoughts that have been scattered suddenly connect. Clarity returns, and you remember what your own voice sounds like. Rule 3. Believe before the world does. There will be a season in your life when you are building something and no one sees it yet. You are working hard, making progress, developing yourself, but the external world has not noticed. No one is congratulating you. No one is applauding. No one is validating that you are moving in the right direction. This is the season where most people quit. They interpret the absence of recognition as proof that their path is wrong. And slowly, doubt creeps in. But the Stoics understood something about timing that most modern people have forgotten. Every meaningful vision begins in invisibility. Before the world believes in you, you must first believe in yourself. This is not positive thinking. This is the deliberate practice of trusting your own judgment when the only person who can validate it is you. Marcus Aurelius did not wait for the empire to prove he was worthy of leadership. He led because he knew what leadership required. Epictetus did not wait for the world to recognize his wisdom. He taught because he understood what truth was. They did not need permission. They did not need approval. They had belief. Self-belief is built through evidence. Not the evidence of external success, but the evidence of your own consistency. Every day you keep your commitment to yourself, you collect proof. That proof accumulates. Your brain begins to recognize a pattern. You are someone who follows through. You are someone who acts even when no one is watching. Building self-belief requires clarity about why your future matters. Not why it matters to impress anyone, but why it matters to you. What is the deeper reason you must continue even when progress is invisible? When you have a clear reason that connects to your values, to the person you are becoming, to the contribution you want to make, that reason becomes fuel. It sustains you through the invisible season. Another powerful method is visualization. Not as fantasy, but as rehearsal. Spend a few minutes each day imagining the version of yourself you are building. Imagine the discipline you maintain, the obstacles you overcome with composure, the character you develop through difficulty. Your brain responds to repeated imagery, but the real test comes when failure happens, because it will happen. Not because you are incapable, but because attempting anything meaningful includes the possibility of setback. Most people interpret failure as evidence that they should not have tried. But failures are actually the price of building something that matters. When setback occurs, pause. Reflect on what you can learn. Then release the guilt that serves no purpose and return to action as quickly as possible. Self-belief is tested most intensely during the invisible season, the season where no one external can see your development. In that season, the only validation available is the validation you give yourself. And the person who masters this ability becomes unstoppable. Rule 4. Master your presence. The way you show up in the world sends a message before you speak a single word. Most people underestimate how powerfully their presence influences how others respond to them. Presence is not about being louder or more dramatic. It is about alignment. It is about your internal state and external expression being so aligned that people feel it. When you are internally uncertain but trying to project confidence, people feel the mismatch. But when you are internally grounded, people feel that alignment. And alignment commands respect. The Stoics understood that your body communicates constantly. Research in embodied cognition shows that how you physically position yourself actually changes your hormones and your neurochemistry. A collapsed posture increases cortisol. An open posture does the opposite. You are literally not the same person in different physical positions. Your biochemistry has changed. This means presence begins with your body. It begins with the simple act of occupying space intentionally. Presence also communicates through movement. Movement that is rushed signals anxiety, but movement that is measured and intentional signals control. Your voice is another powerful communicator. A voice that is rushed and uncertain loses authority, but a voice that is measured, with clear pronunciation and intentional pauses, carries weight. This is not about performance. It is about control. Initiative is another element. People who have presence do not wait for permission to contribute. They greet others first. They share ideas without hesitation. This behavior signals confidence and responsibility. When you consistently take initiative, the environment around you adjusts to your energy. Energy itself is contagious. The emotional state you carry into a space influences the atmosphere around it. If you enter with anxiety and doubt, that tension spreads. But when you enter with calm focus, with grounded confidence, others begin responding to that stability. Many people are held back because they fear judgment. They imagine others constantly analyzing their behavior. The reality is far different. Most people are focused on their own insecurities, not on evaluating you. When you release the fear of being perfectly approved by everyone, you reclaim freedom. For the next 7 days, make one change to your physical presence. Maybe you straighten your posture. Maybe you slow your speech slightly. Maybe you make deliberate eye contact. Notice how people respond differently. Over time, this consistent presence becomes automatic. Your external presentation reinforces your internal identity, and your internal identity reinforces your external presence. Rule 5. Remove what weakens you. Growth is not only about what you add, it is also about what you remove. Many people focus exclusively on addition, but they ignore the things in their lives that are slowly draining their confidence and weakening their identity. If you continue tolerating habits, environments, and relationships that pull you downward, your progress will always feel limited. The first place to examine is your internal dialogue. The way you speak to yourself when no one is listening shapes your emotional state more than any external factor. Many people are far harsher with themselves than they would ever be with another person. They replay failures. They criticize their abilities. Over time, this pattern becomes automatic. Interrupting this pattern requires deliberate attention. When your mind begins repeating negative assumptions about yourself, pause, question the thought. Replace the criticism with direction. Speak to yourself as someone who is building strength, not someone who is permanently defined by past mistakes. The second area to examine is the people around you. Human beings are deeply influenced by their social environment. Some people encourage growth and celebrate your progress. Others drain your energy through constant negativity. This does not mean you must cut everyone out. It means becoming intentional about the level of influence each person has over your thinking. Habits are another powerful factor. Repeatedly delaying important work teaches your mind that you cannot rely on your discipline. Breaking promises to yourself weakens self-respect. Each of these patterns chips away at confidence. Identify the behaviors that drain your energy. Be willing to remove them completely rather than negotiating small compromises. Your physical environment also plays a role. A chaotic space often produces a scattered mind. Creating an organized environment is not about perfection. It is about supporting clarity. One of the most important shifts you can make is refusing to tolerate what contradicts your standards. Every time you allow something that weakens you to remain in your life, you send a message that your goals are negotiable. When you remove those influences, you send a different message. You remind yourself that the person you are becoming deserves an environment that supports growth. Identify 3 things in your life right now that weaken your confidence. Choose one and remove it completely. This week, pay attention to how your energy shifts. That shift is you reclaiming power. Rule 6. The invisible season. The most difficult stage of growth is not the beginning when motivation is high, and it is not the end when success becomes visible. The most difficult stage is the middle. The quiet season where you are working consistently, yet the results remain invisible. This is when most people lose faith. They begin questioning whether their effort matters. They look around and see others moving faster. Slowly, doubt appears. The temptation to abandon the process grows stronger. But real transformation almost always happens beneath the surface long before it becomes visible. Just as roots grow underground before a tree rises above the soil, your identity is developing quietly. Every disciplined decision, every focused hour, every moment where you continue despite discomfort is shaping a stronger version of yourself. Many people quit during this invisible season because the human mind craves evidence. When that evidence does not appear immediately, the mind begins searching for alternatives. They change their plans. They restart new strategies. Every time they restart, they reset the momentum they were building. Progress requires time to compound. A person who does one small focused task every day for a year will achieve far more than someone who has one intense week per year. But the daily person may feel like they are making no progress until they look back across 12 months. Trusting the process means staying loyal to your path long enough for the results to catch up with your effort. It means understanding that the discipline you practice today may not produce visible rewards tomorrow, but it is still shaping the identity that will eventually create those rewards. Instead of measuring your progress only by external results, begin measuring the quality of your decisions. Ask yourself whether you showed up when you promised you would, whether you maintained focus when distractions appeared, whether you continued acting even when your motivation was low. Protecting your vision is also critical. Your vision is more than a goal. It is a mental blueprint of the life you are building and the person you are becoming. Without a clear vision, your attention will drift toward whatever demands your energy in the moment. Failure will still happen during the invisible season, but failure is not the opposite of progress. Failure is one of the ways progress happens. The people who eventually succeed are not those who avoided failure. They are those who failed and continued anyway. When setback occurs, follow a simple reset. First, reflect on what happened and what you can learn. Then allow yourself time to rest so your perspective becomes clear. Next, release the guilt that does not serve you. Finally, return to action as quickly as possible. Even if the step you take is small, movement restores momentum. Resilience is built through repetition. Each time you face difficulty and continue moving forward, your brain records it as proof that you are capable of recovery. Over time, this pattern becomes part of your identity. You stop fearing setbacks because you know they cannot permanently stop you. Integration and closing. These 6 principles work together to rebuild identity from the ground up. When you stop accepting old narratives about yourself, your presence begins to shift. When your presence shifts, people respond differently. When people respond differently, your evidence of capability grows. When your evidence grows, you can trust the process. When you trust the process, you protect your mind because you no longer need quick validation. When you protect your mind, the internal dialogue quiets. And when you can hear your own direction, you act as if you are the best, not from arrogance, but from alignment. All 6 themes work together to rebuild an identity that is not fragile, dependent on external validation, but solid, that generates its own evidence and trusts its own direction. The challenge: choose one of these 6 themes. Just one, the one that hit you hardest, the one you know you need to implement. Commit to practicing that theme for 30 days, not perfectly, just consistently. Then come back and comment, "Acting like the best, today." Because that comment is your public declaration that you are no longer waiting for circumstances to change. You are deciding right now that the person you are becoming deserves to be built intentionally. If this resonated with you, subscribe to the channel. Every week we explore principles like these that transform how you see yourself and how you move through the world. Share this with someone who needs to remember that identity is not fixed, it is chosen. Master your mind, or it will master you. This is the Stoic equilibrium. Reason as a way of life, virtue as strength, discipline as the path. See you in the next video.